Why does regulation come before learning in autism? Hello everyone, I will indeed answer this question in this video, which is based on my experience with my son Alexandre, who is 9 years old and was diagnosed with level 1 autism at the age of 3. And I will share with you my experience following the implementation of neuromodulation, which made it possible to create a turning point in his development. For many years, probably like you, I was extremely, how should I put it, troubled. Our quality of life was greatly diminished by Alexandre's self-stimulation, his stereotypies, his crying and laughing fits, strange noises, odd behaviors, putting things in his mouth and writing the alphabet or numbers constantly on a slate. These are all things that break a parent's heart every time they see that their son, daughter or child is not regulated. Because that's the first thing that's visible in an autistic child. It's when you go out, when you walk down the street, when you go to school, when you go outside. Indeed, it's the way others look at you and seeing that your child is not regulated, seeing that your child has strange behaviors and always noticing the looks from others, feeling a bit of sympathy, and then thinking to yourself that you're unlucky, you're the parent of a disabled child. And it's an extremely awful feeling. With time, you get used to it and you stop caring about what others think. At least I hope that's the approach you take. Now, in my particular case, there is a very specific chronological sequence of events, which essentially means that emotional regulation must always be fully achieved before any real learning can actually begin to take place. And what I've noticed, and what scientific literature also confirms, is that when the brain is not ready to learn, because it is dysfunctional, especially at the electrophysiological level, well, you have a child who won't have the ability to learn, who won't be able to concentrate, who won't be able to memorize information. You will be forced to repeat things over and over to deal with, let's say, behavioral problems, hyperactivity, hypoactivity, a child who is too sluggish, a child who is too excitable, and so on, which becomes unmanageable. In fact, in a word, in a single sentence, your child is not ready to learn. But to solve this problem, we don't address the symptoms. That's the mistake I made myself for many years. I thought that by telling my son, don't do this, don't do that, behave yourself, don't write on the slate, stop writing the alphabet, write me sentences instead. I was always trying to redirect him with the best intentions and the greatest kindness a father can have for his son, to steer him toward activities that were, let's say, normal and healthy. And I think you probably have the same approach. Now, what I wish I had known earlier and what I'm sharing with you in this video is that if your child's brain is dysfunctional from an electrophysiological point of view, by addressing the symptoms, by trying to retrain the symptoms, you won't improve much. Because if the root of the problem is that the brain isn't properly synchronized, if the brain has a connectivity issue, hypoactivation, if the areas aren't communicating well with each other, all of these are somewhat simplified terms that I'm presenting to you in this video, which I'm making a bit easier to help you visualize and understand the dysfunctions that exist in autistic children. Well, you'll understand that the very first thing to do is to address that. You might ask me, how can I regulate my child? And that's a very good question. And in my case, what really helped regulate him and was truly a game changer, there was a before and an after, was neuromodulation, which changed everything for us because the self-stimulation behaviors and stereotypies were reduced by about 80%. So the neural noise that causes your child to have regulation problems is actually a neuronal issue, of course. But contrary to what most autism specialists tell you, it is not solely related to brain architecture. You should know that among children diagnosed with autism, many of them have functional problems, meaning they are purely electrophysiological. And even among children who are truly autistic, meaning those who have an atypical brain architecture, regulation can be greatly improved with neuromodulation, which will allow the brain to function better, to operate in a much more optimal way. The dysfunctions that we see on an electroencephalogram within your child's brain, we will be able to improve your child's brain function, enhance the connectivity between different areas. Every single bit of this information is firmly rooted in the extensive body of peer-reviewed scientific literature. The real tragedy of the situation is that today there are currently more than 5,000 published scientific articles regarding neuromodulation, And yet, unfortunately, the vast majority of early childhood specialists in the field of autism, and I am specifically talking about certified clinical psychologists, certified directors of institutions, and ABA specialists working in ABA centers or schools. These dedicated autism specialists are simply not aware of this research at all. That's the tragedy. Today we have more than 5,000 scientific articles on neuromodulation, and yet very few people know about it or are aware of the major impact it can have on autistic children. On this YouTube channel, I will share with you Alexandre's progress over the coming months since I have implemented neuromodulation in an intensive daily, almost daily manner with a specialized educator working in synergy. And for the first time in Alexandre's life, he will turn 10 in the coming days, I feel that my son is starting to catch up very quickly on a large part of his developmental delay. My son was diagnosed with autism and he was not making any progress. He was stuck for 7 years, stuck in hypersensitivity, stuck in stereotypes, in restricted interests, which are a main criterion of autism. He was stuck in the absence of language or with extremely emerging language. And I was constantly tackling the symptoms. But if you respect the brain hierarchy, which means that first you actually have regulation being established, then you have the brain's ability to process information, the ability to learn, and finally you have the more advanced cognitive abilities which are more demanding in terms of resources such as language, generalization, theory of mind, the child's intellectual abilities. All these functions are deficient when the underlying regulation is not properly established. This hierarchy is present in the scientific literature. First comes regulation and then the cognitive functions that are more demanding. And neuromodulation will precisely allow us to restore to a certain extent and with varying degrees of effectiveness. There's no magic here, but the scientific literature shows us results that are much more significant than, for example, ABA, which is very expensive, takes a lot of time, and requires mobilizing full-time specialized educators with progress that is quite relative. But that's what they're selling you as the best option today. But that's not true. It's not true. At least I believe I am well positioned to testify to this based on my son Alexandre and the neuromodulation I have implemented over the past 3 months. If you address the root of the problem, you can unlock these functional issues that may be affecting your child's regulation and allow them to make progress in learning later on. I hope this video will raise your awareness about this issue. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to subscribe so you can receive the next videos where I will discuss Alexandre's development. This might be of interest to you for your autistic child, and I wish your autistic child the best possible improvement. I encourage you to fight. I encourage you not to listen to the pessimists who think nothing can be done. There is a lot that can be done in autism. It's not just about ABA. It's not just about behavioral learning with an educator. You have other options, including neuromodulation, which I believe is a solution for the future that can greatly improve things for your autistic child. I wish you courage and good luck with your child.